close your eyes and let the heavy, frantic weight of the modern world simply drop away. Imagine yourself standing on a hand-hewn wooden porch in the year 1803. The wood beneath your feet is silvered by the sun and worn smooth by the passage of seasons you have watched from this very spot. There is no hum of electricity here. There is no distant rhythmic whine of tires on an interstate, and no flickering glow from a screen. There is only the profound velvet silence of a world that begins and ends within the small golden distance you can walk before the noon sun reaches its peak. This morning, the air is cool and thick with the scent of damp cedar and the faint, sweet ghost of wood smoke drifting from a hearth that has been burning since long before you woke. You are standing at the edge of your entire universe. Your boots are heavy, caked with a layer of gray clay from the local creek mud, so familiar you could identify it by touch alone. To your left, a narrow bruised ribbon of a footpath vanishes into a towering wall of ancient whispering oaks that have stood guard over this valley for centuries. To your right, the soft amber glow of a neighbor's window is the furthest star in your personal cosmos. In this era, you are not a traveler, and you are not a consumer of distances. You are a witness to a single, sacred patch of ground. You were born in the long shifting shadow of this specific hill. You have spent every hour of your strength laboring in the dirt of this specific field. And when your time eventually comes to an end, you will rest eternally beneath the deep, quiet roots of the very trees you climbed as a child. This is the 10-mile circle. It is an invisible boundary, sturdier than any stone wall and more persistent than any written law. In the early years of the 19th century, the idea of crossing a state line was not a matter of a few hours in a car. It was a myth, a legend shared by sailors, explorers, and those few restless souls who had nothing left to lose. For you, and for everyone you have ever known, the horizon is not a destination to be reached, but a beautiful, permanent frame for your home. Within these 10 miles, you are a person with a history. You have a name that carries the weight of your father's reputation and your grandfather's labor. People know the sound of your gait and the specific tilt of your hat. You belong here. Beyond that ridge, however, where the sun is currently beginning its slow, golden descent, the world becomes a blurred and dangerous mystery. To leave this circle was to step into the unknown, to become a ghost among strangers, a cipher with no roots in a world that demanded to see exactly where you were planted. As you lean against the rough-sawn pillar of your porch, let your pulse slow down to match the ticking of a grandfather clock in the hallway behind you. There is no rush here. The world is not moving fast, and neither are you. You are safe within the limits of the known. You are protected by the very stillness that defines your life. We are going back to a time of profound and beautiful limits, a time when staying still was not a failure of ambition, but an act of devotion to the land. We are stepping back into a century where the ground beneath your feet was the only thing you ever truly needed to know, and where the sky above was a ceiling you shared with only those you loved. But even in this quiet sanctuary, a question lingers in the cool morning air. What was it about the earth itself that kept an entire civilization so perfectly, quietly still? To understand the deep, settling peace of this porch, we must first look out toward the trees and realize that the path ahead was not a road, but a challenge. To leave home was to face a wilderness that did not want to be crossed, a place where the dirt and the rain conspired to keep every soul exactly where they belong. The beauty of staying put was born from the sheer, brutal reality of the American wilder world, where the earth itself seemed to rise up to stop you in your tracks. Take a deep, slow breath now, a long and deliberate drawing in of the cool night air, and as you exhale, feel the remaining tension in your shoulders and your neck begin to simply dissolve. This is your time to settle. Adjust your pillows once more, find the softest corner of your sheets, and allow your limbs to grow heavy, as if they are sinking into the very earth itself, anchored by a pleasant and inevitable weight. Look around your room for a moment, noticing the way the shadows lean gently against the walls in the dim light. The darkness here is not a void, it is a velvet blanket, a quiet and sacred invitation to withdraw from the glare and the noise of the modern world. In this space, right now, there is no urgency. There are no flashing lights demanding your gaze, no invisible demands on your attention, and no glowing screens waiting to pull your tired mind back into the frantic, fragmented stream of the present. You are safe, you are still, and you are beginning to drift backward through the quiet, cooling layers of time. Consider, for a moment, the sheer physical weight of the air in the year 1803. In our time, the atmosphere feels thin and electric, vibrating with the invisible frequency of 1 billion signals crossing through our bodies at every second. We live in a world defined by the frantic ping, the sudden, sharp vibration in a pocket, the cold chime of an incoming message, the relentless and high-pitched hum of a global society that has forgotten how to sleep. Our minds have been trained to react, to jump, to anticipate the next digital interruption before it even arrives. But as you sink deeper into the comfort of your bed, I want you to imagine that all those frequencies are being silenced, one by one. Imagine the wires falling away from the poles, the towers going dark, and the air becoming heavy and still once again. The air of the early 19th century was different. It was thick, slow, and fragrant, laden with the scent of wood fires, damp pine needles, and the honest smell of the rain on dry dust. It was an air that carried only the sounds of the physical, tangible world, the low, melodic lowing of a cow in a distant pasture, the rhythmic, muffled thud of an axe against a fallen log, or the soft, persistent rustle of wind moving through a field of ripening corn like a long, slow sigh. In that world, silence was not merely the absence of noise. It was a living, breathing presence that sat beside you on the porch. When you sat in the deepening twilight of 1803, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt profoundly full. It was the sound of nature breathing in its sleep. You could hear the earth cooling after a long, arduous day under the summer sun, a subtle and melodic creaking of the soil and the timber as the temperature dropped and the world contracted. You could hear the slow, deliberate pulse of the wilderness, a heartbeat that moved in massive cycles of seasons and decades, rather than the frantic seconds and minutes of our modern clocks. There was a deep and lasting comfort in that silence. It was a reminder that the world was vast, steady, and entirely indifferent to the small, flickering anxieties of man. It was a silence that invited you to lean back, to let your chin drop to your chest, and to simply exist within the ancient rhythm of the land. Focus now on the rhythm of your own breath, letting it become as steady and as natural as the flickering of a single tallow candle placed on a rough wooden table. Watch that flame in your mind's eye. It does not burn with the harsh, unwavering, and clinical consistency of an electric bulb. It dances, it bows and sways to the slightest invisible movement of the air in the room. It casts long, soft shadows that stretch and retreat across the wide floorboards, creating a world of warm amber light and deep, comforting charcoal depths. The pace of that flame is the true pace of the year 1803. It is a slow, hypnotic movement that demands nothing from you but your quiet observation. As you watch it, feel your heart rate begin to slow down, synchronizing with its gentle, flickering rhythm. The frantic pace of the 21st century is miles away now, a fading memory of a world you no longer inhabit. You are becoming part of the stillness. You are becoming part of the landscape. Think of the people who lived their entire lives within that 10-mile circle. They did not wake up to the jarring sound of alarms. They woke to the gradual, soft brightening of the sky and the first tentative, melodic notes of the songbirds in the orchard. Their day did not begin with a rush to be somewhere else, to travel or to achieve. Their life was right here, under their feet. There was a deep psychological luxury in knowing that everything you needed to attend to was within sight of your own chimney smoke. There was no pressure to keep up with news from across an ocean, or even from the next county over. The only news that truly mattered was the health of a neighbor's livestock, the ripening of the grain, or the height of the river after a spring rain. This lack of external noise allowed the inner world to expand. It allowed for a level of presence that we struggle to find today, a way of being where every footstep was intentional, every task was a ritual, and every conversation was an event to be savored. Let that sense of profound presence wash over you now. Feel the coolness of the sheets against your skin, and the way the air in your room seems to have grown softer, more cushioned, as if the walls themselves have retreated. You are not just listening to a story, you are being submerged in a different way of existing. The boundaries of your room are fading, replaced by the vast, quiet darkness of the American frontier. The small, familiar sounds of your house are transforming into the ambient music of a world before the machine. The soft click of a settling floorboard becomes the snap of a dry twig in a dark, primeval wood. The distant hum of the wind outside your window becomes the collective sigh of 1,000 miles of untouched forest. You are unmoored from the now, floating peacefully and safely into the then. There is a profound healing in this kind of stillness. It is the medicine of the long view, the perspective of those who knew instinctively that the earth moves slowly and that humans were meant to move slowly with it. You are no longer required to be productive. You are no longer required to be reachable or useful. You are simply a soul in a quiet room, preparing to embark on a journey that requires no exertion of the body, only the total surrender of the mind. The path is opening up before you, carved by generations of feet that walked the same dirt until it was as hard as stone and as familiar as a brother's face. It is a path that does not lead to a crowded city or a noisy marketplace or a cold destination on a map. It is a path that leads inward into the heart of the great quiet mystery of our shared past. With our minds finally quieted and our bodies anchored in the soft luxury of the present darkness, let us step off the porch. Let us leave the safety of the flickering candlelight behind and venture out into the cool, waiting night. Let us step onto the road that leads nowhere, the road that exists only to show us the beauty of a world we often move too fast to see. Step out now from the weathered porch of your home and let your feet find the familiar, rhythmic pattern of the packed earth beneath you. In this world of 1803, there is a profound and heavy sense of security that our modern life has long since traded away for the sake of speed and anonymity. As you walk slowly down the center of the narrow village lane, notice first that there are no strangers here. Not a single one. Every face you pass in the softening light of the afternoon is a face you have known since the very day you were born. When a neighbor looks at you, they do not just see a fleeting passerby. They see your father's eyes, your mother's specific tilt of the head, and the long-enduring legacy of the 3 generations of your family who cleared these very fields and stacked these very stone walls. There is a deep, quiet, and ancient comfort in being known so completely. Your name is not just a label or a digital profile. It is a heavy anchor, tethering you to a community where every individual life is woven into the next like the thick, interlocking threads of a heavy wool blanket. You are safe here because you are a vital part of a whole, a necessary piece of a living, breathing social machine that functions only because everyone remains steadily in their place. Let us wander deeper into this sanctuary of the local, moving with the slow, unhurried gait of someone who has nowhere else to be. Close your eyes within this memory and breathe in the thick air of the village center. It is a rich, intoxicating and sensory tapestry of scents that define the very limits of your world. First, there is the sharp, metallic tang of the blacksmith's forge drifting on the breeze. You can hear the rhythmic, musical ring of the hammer against the heavy anvil sound that serves as the steady, iron heartbeat of the town. The smell of hot iron and glowing coal smoke hangs heavy in the air, a scent of industry, permanence, and strength. Just a few steps further, and the air changes as you pass the general store, the true cathedral of the 10-mile circle. Here, the scent is thick, sweet, and layered. The pungent, earthy aroma of cured tobacco leaves hanging from the rafters. The sharp, vinegary bite of brine from the open pickle barrels, and the dry, dusty smell of unprocessed flour settling on every surface. These smells are not merely odors. They are the familiar markers of home. They signal to your brain that you are exactly where you are supposed to be, protected by the boundaries of the known. The village is a delicate and beautiful ecosystem where everyone has a role that is as permanent and as undeniable as the surrounding hills. The blacksmith, the miller, the cobbler, and the midwife, they are the pillars of your daily existence. You do not need a map to find them, and you certainly do not need an appointment to seek their counsel. You know exactly where the blacksmith keeps his cooling water bucket, and you know precisely which floorboard in the general store will creak when you step on it with your left foot. This profound level of familiarity creates a psychological stillness that is almost impossible to find in our modern anonymous cities. In the early 1800s, you never had to wonder if you belonged. You never had to search for your purpose or your place. The very dirt on your clothes, the specific tools in your hand, and the way your neighbors gave a silent, knowing nod as you passed all confirmed your place in the universe. It was a world of absolute, unwavering clarity. Beneath this daily rhythm lies the most powerful reveal of the 10-mile circle. The community was not just a social group, but your only insurance, your only hospital, and your only true safety net against the hardships of the frontier. In our time, we look to distant institutions and faceless agencies for help, but in 1803, your survival depended entirely on the people within the reach of your own voice. If a barn burned down in the middle of a dry, silent summer night, you did not call for help from a distant city. You simply waited for the church bells to ring, and within minutes the entire village would be there, standing in a silent, moonlit line to pass buckets of water from the well to the flames. If a harvest failed, or a father fell ill during the planting season, the community did not debate the merits of assistance. They simply showed up at dawn with baskets of fresh bread and extra hands for the plow. Everyone knew everything about everyone else. While there was no privacy, there was also no such thing as being forgotten. To be seen was to be saved. This was the silent, sacred contract of the era. You surrendered your anonymity in exchange for a world that would never let you go hungry as long as there was a single loaf of bread left in the county. As the sun begins to dip lower behind the ridgeline, casting long golden fingers of light across the village green, feel the warmth of this shared existence. Imagine the communal fires that are being lit in every stone hearth at this very hour, the smoke rising in straight blue columns into the still air. There is a magnificent, swaying predictability to the seasonal rituals here. You know with absolute certainty that when the first hard frost hits the ground, the cider press will begin to groan under the weight of the harvest. You know that when the spring rains soften the dark earth, the entire village will gather as one to repair the fences and clear the stones from the road. These cycles are like the steady, heavy ticking of a great celestial clock, providing a rhythm to life that hushes the mind and stills the heart. There is no anxiety about the unknown future, because the future looks exactly like the cherished past. The rituals of the year, the harvest festivals, the winter wood hauling, the spring sowings, are the tracks upon which your entire life glides. They are repetitive, they are slow, and they are deeply, profoundly soothing to the soul. Spend a quiet moment, now sitting on a fallen cedar log near the edge of the commons, watching the blue wood smoke rise and mingle from a dozen different chimneys simultaneously. The light is fading into a soft, hazy violet, and the world is beginning to tuck itself in. The sounds of the working day are being replaced by the evening chorus, the low, vibrating hum of cicadas in the high grass and the distant, lonely, melodic call of a whippoorwill in the deep woods. In this moment, you feel a sense of belonging that transcends the need for words. You are not a solitary atom drifting through an indifferent space. You are a vital cell in a larger living body. You are protected. You are seen. You are home. The walls of your 10-mile world are not made of cold stone or hard wood, but of the collective memory and the shared labor of every soul you have ever loved or known. It is a sanctuary of the familiar, a place where the gathering shadows hold no terrors because you know exactly which ancient tree or which leaning barn is casting them. But as you sit there in the twilight, feeling the deep settling peace of the village, you notice something small but significant. You look down at your heavy boots, and then you look at the narrow road that leads away from the center of town toward the dark horizon. The very mud that you have walked in all your life, the same thick, dark mud that nourishes your crops and holds the foundations of your community together, is also a physical weight. It is thick, persistent, and incredibly heavy. You begin to realize that the same boundaries that keep you safe are the same boundaries that keep you perfectly still. The sanctuary is also a container. You begin to understand that the world is vastly larger than these 10 miles, but the earth itself seems determined to keep right here. For as much as the community provides a soft net for your fall, the land provides a heavy anchor for your feet. You realize that even the safest cage has bars, and for many in this quiet, beautiful era, those bars were made of the very mud that gave them life. And, to truly understand the weight of those bars, we must leave the warmth of the village fire and face the cold, hard reality of the road that waits in the shadows. Now, as you settle deeper into the profound stillness of your own room, I want you to feel the true, heavy physical reality of what it actually meant to leave that sanctuary of the porch behind. In our modern world, a mile has become a meaningless unit of time, a mere 60 seconds of effortless gliding in a climate-controlled cabin. A fleeting, blurry streak of green and gray beyond a double-paned glass window. But in the year 1803, a mile was a monumental achievement of the human spirit and physical endurance. Moving just one single mile through the American wilderness was not a commute. It was a grueling battle against the elements. Feel the phantom ache in your own muscles as you imagine stepping off that firm, sun-baked village lane and into the raw, unyielding, and chaotic terrain of the frontier. Every step you take is a deliberate, intentional act of will. The ground beneath you is never level. It is a treacherous sea of tangled ancient roots, hidden jagged stones, and deceptive, leaf-covered hollows. To move forward is to strain against the very gravity of the earth itself, dragging the full weight of your body through air that feels thick, heavy, and saturated with the humidity of 1,000 miles of untamed primeval forest. By the time you reach the very first mile marker, your breath is ragged. Your shins are bruised from the undergrowth, and the quiet world you left behind already feels like a fading, impossible dream. As we move further from the safety of the village, the path narrows and darkens until it becomes something the early settlers called a corduroy road. Imagine, in your mind's eye, a road constructed not of stone, gravel, or asphalt, but of raw, unpeeled tree trunks laid side by side across a black, bottomless, and starving swamp. They called it corduroy because the logs resembled the ribbed fabric of a gentleman's heavy winter trousers. But there was absolutely nothing soft about the experience. Picture a massive, heavy wooden wagon, its wheels iron-rimmed and utterly unforgiving, beginning to roll over these uneven logs. Feel the vibration deep within your own bones. Every single inch of forward motion is accompanied by a bone-shaking, jolty rhythmic, violent and relentless shudder that travels from the iron rim, through the oak spokes, up the axle, and directly into the base of your spine. There are no metal springs to catch your fall. There is no soft rubber to dampen the blow. It is the raw sound of wood screaming against wood, a relentless clack-thud that rattles your teeth and numbs your hands until you can no longer feel the reins. If the logs are wet from a morning mist, they become as slick as ice. If they are old and weathered, they rot from beneath, creating treacherous, invisible gaps that can snap a wagon wheel like a dry twig, or trap the frantic leg of a panicked horse in a splintering, inescapable vice. To travel this way was to be in a constant, exhausting state of tactile negotiation with the planet. You could not simply look at the distant horizon. You were forced to study the mud with the intensity of a scholar. There was an entire, complex vocabulary for the earth beneath your wheels, for the mud was the true ruler of the 19th century. There was the shallow skim, a deceptive layer of fine dust over a hard pan that could send a heavy carriage sliding uncontrollably into a steep ditch. There was the honeypot, a deep, swirling vortex of liquid clay and prehistoric silt that could swallow an entire wooden wheel all the way to the hub in a single, sickening, silent gulp. Imagine the sound of that mudder thick, wet, and powerful sucking noise, as if the earth itself is trying to inhale the very boots off your feet or the wagon off the path. Imagine the pungent smell of it, the anaerobic, sulphurous and biting scent of ancient rotting leaves and stagnant, black water disturbed for the first time in 100 years. This was the true physics of immobility. The world was not designed for your easy passage. It was designed to stay exactly where it was, and it treated your human desire to move as a personal intrusion, to be resisted with every ounce of its heavy, muddy, and primordial soul. And here is the reveal, the quiet truth that we, in our age of effortless global flights and high-speed rails, find almost impossible to truly grasp. In the year 1803, a journey of a mere 30 miles was not a simple trip. It was a life-altering, monumental expedition. If you lived in the rural wilderness of Ohio and found it necessary to travel 30 miles to a distant county seat or a river port, you did not simply get up and go. You prepared for weeks in advance. You mended every leather harness, reinforced every wooden spoke with iron, and packed enough salted meat and dry cornmeal to survive a week of isolation in the wild. You said goodbye to your family with a heavy gravity that suggested you might never actually return to them. Because 30 miles was not just a distance on a map, it was a gauntlet of potential, life-ending disasters. A single hour of heavy rain could turn a small, quiet creek into an impassable, raging river, stranding you for days without shelter. A broken axle in the heart of the Black Forest meant you were miles away from the nearest blacksmith, facing a long night of predatory shadows with nothing to protect you but a hand axe and a desperate prayer. For most people of this era, a 30-mile journey happened perhaps only twice in an entire lifetime. It was a legendary story you told your grandchildren by the fire, the time you saw the Great Falls, or the time you walked all the way to the very edge of the known world and somehow found your way back. Let your tired mind drift now to the hypnotic, slow rhythm of that movement. Imagine you are sitting on the hard wooden bench of a slow-moving cart. The world is passing by at the exact speed of a calm human heartbeat. You have stopped fighting the road. You have finally surrendered your will to it. Watch the slow, relentless, and circular rotation of the large wooden rear wheel as it churns through a deep, water-filled rut. It moves with a heavy, circular, and ancient grace, lifting massive clods of dark, wet earth and dropping them back into the slurry with a soft, rhythmic, and wet splash. Turn, lift, fall, turn, lift, fall. The wooden spokes catch the dappled, fading sunlight filtering through the high canopy of ancient elms, creating a flickering, hypnotic pattern of gold and deep shadow that dances across your closed eyelids. The world has become so quiet that you can hear the leather harness groaning rhythmically against the horse's powerful shoulders, and the occasional, deep snort of the beast as it leans into the massive weight of the load. There is no destination anymore, only the eternal cycle of the wheel. The motion is so incredibly slow, so repetitive, and so consistent that it begins to feel like a lullaby, a heavy, earthen song that pulls your consciousness down toward the dark, quiet, and welcoming soil. The sheer, staggering labor of this existence was a constant, low-grade hum in the background of every single human life. Every calorie you burned was a precious, hard-won resource that could not be replaced easily. To move yourself, your goods, or your beloved family was to spend the literal currency of your own physical life force. There was no such thing as free or easy motion. Every single foot of forward progress was bought with the salt of your sweat and the painful straining of your muscles. This is precisely why the 10-mile circle was so incredibly powerful and persistent. It was not just a cultural choice, but an economic necessity of the human body. Why would anyone waste the precious energy of a full week's labor just to go to a place where they were not known, where they had no roots, when everything they needed to survive and thrive was right here, where the mud was familiar, the water was clean, and the hills were your oldest friends? Feel the deep, heavy exhaustion settling into your own limbs now. A phantom tiredness that comes from imagining a world where the very earth was a constant physical adversary. Your bed feels softer, more stable, and more miraculous when you realize that for your ancestors, stillness was the greatest luxury they could ever hope to afford. The road was a predator, a silent consumer of time, youth, and health. But even as you settle into this profound peace, remember that the legendary difficulty of the road wasn't just about the thick mud or the broken wheels. It was about the heavy spiritual toll of the journey itself. Because beyond the physical strain, there was a deeper, more permanent cost to leaving the circle, a cost that wasn't measured in silver coins, but in the very breath and life of those who dared to wander too far from the safety of the heart. And then there was the cost not in money, but in life and breath. Imagine, for a long and quiet moment, that you have finally reached the very limit of your physical and spiritual endurance. You are standing precisely at the edge of the 10th mile, where the very last familiar fence post, hand-carved by a neighbor you have known since childhood, rots quietly and gracefully into the tall golden meadow grass. Behind you lies everything that has ever given your life meaning and structure. The thin gray columns of chimney smoke from people who love you, the stony fields you have bled into year after year, and the comforting, predictable rhythm of the village bell that marks the beginning and the end of every day. But ahead of you, the path changes fundamentally. It is no longer a road maintained by the collective, hard-working hands of your neighbors. It narrows into a thin, tentative, and fragile thread, a mere suggestion of human passage, carved more by the seasonal hooves of wandering deer, or the silent, ancient footfalls of those who disappeared into the trees long ago. This is the true edge of the known world. To step over this invisible, sacred line is to leave behind the safety of being a someone with a story and to enter the vast, cold, and echoing emptiness of being a total stranger. The psychological weight of this transition is far heavier than the leather pack resting on your tired shoulders. In the year 1803, your identity is not something you carry hidden inside you, like a modern passport or a digital record. It is something that is reflected back at you in the warm eyes of those you see every day. Within your 10-mile circle, you are defined by your complex lineage, your honest debts, your specific skills, and the quiet promises you have kept. But as you stare into the deepening, darkening woods of the 11th mile, you realize with a start that out there, you are nothing more than a ghost. No one there knows if your word is as good as gold. No one knows if your family name is honorable or stained by ancient scandals. To move beyond the 10-mile radius in this era was to suffer a kind of profound social death. You were suddenly untethered from the earth, drifting into a wide world where the only law was the unsettling distance between your hand and your knife. Feel that hesitation now, a cold, creeping shiver that has nothing to do with the evening wind. It is the primal, inherited fear of the hearth fire, losing its warmth as you turn your back on the only home you have ever known. And here is the quiet, stinging reveal of this long-forgotten era. In the early 19th century, travel was never seen as an exciting adventure or a poetic way to find oneself. It was viewed by the community with deep, dark, and lingering suspicion. To leave your home without a desperate, undeniable reason was to risk your very reputation and your standing in the eyes of God and man. If a man appeared in a distant, lonely town, dusty and weary from the long road, but what exactly he was running from? Why would a settled, honest, and God-fearing man ever abandon the sacred soil of his fathers? Were you fleeing a mounting debt that you could not pay? Were you escaping a secret crime, or a broken vow that haunted your sleep? To be a traveler was to be a vagabond, a person without a shadow, a wandering creature of the road who could never truly be trusted because you had no deep roots to hold you accountable to the world. The further you wandered from your circle, the more your character began to fray and dissolve in the minds of every person you met. You were trading your honor for the distant horizon, and for most people in 1803, that was a price far too high to ever consider paying. Let the sharp tension of that thought begin to soften now. Like the fading, amber light of a long and weary day, look out across the vast valley that lies just beyond that mysterious 10th mile. It is a place of profound, untouched, and terrifying beauty. The sun is beginning to slip silently behind a jagged, distant ridge of purple mountains, casting a final, golden, and melancholic glow across a sea of ancient forest that has never known the sharp bite of an iron axe. The valley floor is filled with a soft, blue hazy, thick, rolling mist that rises from hidden streams and nameless, ancient groves where no human foot has stepped for a generation. There is no sound here but the deep, mournful, and steady sigh of the wind moving through the high pines. It is a lonely, majestic beauty, a silent world that exists perfectly well without the interference or the observation of man. The trees do not care about your name or your family history. The rivers do not ask for your credentials or your destination. There is a strange, quiet, and terrifying peace in this total anonymity. A sudden realization that the world is unimaginably vast, and you are very, very small. As the gold of the sunset turns to a deep royal indigo, and the very first stars begin to pierce the velvet sky like diamonds, feel yourself settling into this new, deeper stillness. You are standing at the threshold of a much greater mystery than the village lanes you left behind. You have survived the sucking mud of the lowlands. You have understood the suffocating safety of the village. And now you are looking at the great beyond with a heart that is finally beginning to steady its frantic beat. The fear of being a stranger is slowly being replaced by the quiet, overwhelming awe of the sheer scale of the American continent. You are a tiny, flickering point of consciousness on the edge of a landmass that stretches for thousands of miles into the absolute dark. The air around you has turned cold now, a sharp, bracing, and clean chill that smells of coming frost and high-altitude snow. You pull your heavy wool coat tighter around your chest, feeling the solid, warm reality of your own breath as it mists in the moonlight. You are not quite ready to cross the valley yet, but you are no longer afraid to look at it. You have understood the weight of the circle, but you are finally beginning to sense the magnetic pull of the distance. But while most people remain safely rooted in the dirt of their birth until the day they died, there were always those few who looked at the horizon not with suspicion, but with a quiet, burning, and unquenchable hunger. Beyond that valley, hidden in the long shadows of the tall timber, lay a completely different kind of life story of those who refused to be held by the heavy mud of the road. Those who dared to own a horse and claim the terrifying speed of the wind for their own. Beyond that valley lay a story of those who dared to own a horse. In the deep, settling stillness of the early 1800s, The horse was far more than a simple animal. It was the only true engine of the entire human world. Yet, it was an engine made of fragile bone, sensitive skin, and a temperament as unpredictable as a sudden summer storm. We often look back at this distant era through a soft, romantic lens, imagining a lone rider galloping effortlessly across a sun-drenched meadow with the wind in their hair and the horizon opening up like a promise before them. But the harsh, daily reality of owning a horse in the 19th century was not a story of effortless freedom. It was a narrative of profound, exhausting, and relentless responsibility. A horse was not a luxury vehicle that you could simply park in a cold shed and forget until the whim to travel struck you. It was a living, breathing, and incredibly high-maintenance companion that required far more daily care, more precious calories, and more constant attention than the very humans it carried. To own a horse was to enter into a permanent marriage with a beast that dictated every single moment of your waking schedule. Imagine the immense logistical weight of keeping this biological engine running. A horse does not run on gasoline or electricity. It runs on massive, back-breaking quantities of high-quality forage, clean, running water, and constant, meticulous grooming. Every single morning, long before the golden sun had even begun to burn away the thick valley mist, the horse owner was already deep at work in the shadows of the barn. You had to pitch heavy mounds of hay, muck out a sodden stall, and check every single inch of those powerful muscular legs for any sign of swelling or hidden heat. Then came the grooming, the rhythmic, hypnotic, and repetitive scraping of a metal currycomb against a dusty winter coat, pulling out the dried mud and salt from the previous day's heavy labor. This was not a task performed for aesthetics. A single, tiny burr trapped under a heavy leather saddle could cause a painful, festering sore that would sideline your only means of transport for a full month. And then there were the hooves, the four delicate, vital points upon which your entire physical world rested. The blacksmith was your most essential ally in this world. For a horse without iron shoes was a horse that would soon be permanently crippled by the jagged stones and frozen ruts of the frontier. You lived in a state of constant, low-grade anxiety about the thrown shoe, that sudden, sickening metallic ping against a stray rock that signaled the immediate end of your journey and the beginning of a long, agonizing, and limping walk back to the safety of home. The primal fear that haunted every single traveler was not just the depth of the mud, but the terrifying and sudden fragility of the beast itself. Imagine being 15 miles deep into the ancient timber, far beyond the comforting reach of your 10-mile circle, when your horse suddenly stumbles on a hidden route. In an instant, the steady, rhythmic beat of the journey breaks and shatters. You dismount in the sudden, heavy silence of the cooling woods, your heart hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird, only to find your animal favoring a front leg with a look of quiet confusion in its eyes. In the year 1803, a broken leg was not a medical challenge to be solved with surgery and rest. It was a final, devastating death sentence. There were no trailers to haul a wounded animal back to civilization, and no veterinarians with mobile clinics waiting at the end of a telephone line. There was only the heavy, suffocating silence of the forest and the cold realization that your companion, the creature you had fed, brushed, and talked to for years, was now a tragedy in the making. You were suddenly and utterly alone, stranded by the very creature that was supposed to save you from the weight of the mud. This vulnerability was a constant psychological shadow, a persistent reminder that your hard-won ability to move across the earth was entirely dependent on a heart that could stop and a bone that could snap in the blink of an eye. And here is the staggering, quiet reveal that puts the entire 19th century into its true perspective. Owning a horse was effectively like owning a second home, but a home that could literally die if it wandered into the wrong patch of pasture and ate the single wrong kind of toxic grass. A horse was a massive, life-defining financial and emotional investment, often costing a family more than the very land they plowed. If a horse succumbed to the sudden agony of colic or a seasonal respiratory fever, a family's entire economic future and security could vanish into the air overnight. You had to protect it from the biting winter cold, shield it from the swarms of flies that could drive a sensitive animal to the brink of madness, and constantly monitor the clarity and quality of every drop of water it drank. You were never just a rider, you were a full-time nurse, a dedicated nutritionist, and a fierce guardian. The horse did not truly grant you freedom from the circle. In many ways, it acted as a heavy tether, pulling you back to the barn, back to the hayloft, and back to the endless, exhausting cycle of chores required to keep 1,000 pounds of complex muscle alive and functioning. For most people of this era, the burden of the beast was simply too heavy a price to pay for the fleeting sake of seeing what lay beyond the next blue ridge. Let yourself sink down now into the hypnotic, sensory loop of a successful journey, a rare and beautiful moment when the horse, the rider, and the road are in perfect, quiet harmony. Imagine you are riding at a slow, deliberate walking pace down a soft, sandy forest track that smells of pine and ancient earth. The air is cool and still, and the canopy of oaks high above is so thick and green that the world feels like a vast, living cathedral. Listen closely to the sound of the steady, 4-beat rhythm of heavy hooves striking the damp earth. Clip, clop, swish, clip, clop, swish. It is a repetitive, ancient and primal music that bypasses the thinking brain and speaks directly to the soul's need for order. The heavy leather of the saddle creaks rhythmically beneath you, a comforting organic groan that matches the slow lateral sway of your hips. You can smell the warm salt and hay scent of the horse's powerful neck rising up to meet you in the humid afternoon air. The world is reduced to this singular loop of sound and scent, a slow-motion film where the ancient trees pass by with an agonizing, beautiful, and meditative slowness. You are moving faster than a man on foot, yet you are still deeply and irrevocably embedded in the stillness of the landscape. The horse's ears flick back and forth with every step, listening to soft sounds you cannot yet hear: the scurrying of a fox in the high brush, the distant, sharp crack of a falling branch, the approach of a summer rain. You begin to realize that you are experiencing the world through the horse's heightened senses as much as your own. This is the true slow story of the 1800s, a narrative that unfolds at exactly 3 miles per hour, where every single mile is earned through patience, and every successful arrival at a distant gate is treated as a minor miracle. The relentless repetition of the hoofbeats becomes a form of deep meditation, a way of erasing the lingering anxieties of the past and the uncertainties of the future until there is only the present moment. The motion is so steady, so predictable, and so rhythmic that your eyelids begin to feel impossibly heavy. The swaying of the animal's warm body is like a giant, living cradle, rocking you slowly into a state of deep, empathic connection with the very earth. But even this perfect hypnotic loop must eventually find its ending. As the long shadows of the tall timber begin to stretch across the path like dark, reaching fingers, you feel a subtle shift in the temperature of the air. The horse senses it too, its pace quickening just slightly as it thinks of the dark stable and the sweet smell of the grain. The golden, dusty light of the late afternoon is being slowly swallowed by the deep emerald gloom of the primeval forest. You realize with a start that the horse is your only source of light, your only generator of heat, and your only hope of returning to the safety of the circle before the night truly takes hold of the world. For in this century, the line between a successful, peaceful journey and a desperate, lonely struggle for survival was as thin as a single leather rein. When the horse thrived, the world felt manageable and small. But when the horse failed, the forest took over and the shadows grew long. The deep, emerald gloom of the ancient forest begins to thin at last. And for the first time in many exhausting hours, the suffocating, heavy weight of the unknown starts to lift gently from your chest. Your horse, sensing the subtle shift in the air long before you do, prickles its tired ears and quickens its steady step, its heavy hooves finding a firmer, more rhythmic, and more confident purchase on the dark earth. And then, through the interlacing branches of the final thicket, you see it the first flickering, golden, and miraculous beacon of a distant lantern hanging by a wooden gate you have passed 1,000 times in your life. The wave of relief that washes over you is a physical, visceral thing. It is a warm tide that uncurls your cramped, frozen fingers from the leather reins and softens the deep-seated tension in your weary jaw. There is no feeling in the entire early 19th century quite like the return to the circle. To see that tiny flickering light in the vast dark is to know with absolute certainty that you are no longer a ghost wandering in the wilderness. You are once again a person with a living name, a solid home, and a rightful place by the fire. You are crossing back over the invisible sacred threshold, leaving the predatory, heavy silence of the deep woods for the melodic, familiar, and rhythmic hum of the human world. As you re-enter the 10-mile bubble, the very quality of the air seems to change, becoming sweeter, warmer, and more structured. The jagged, terrifying, and infinite scale of the wild horizon shrinks back down into the manageable, comforting, and human proportions of the village. You pass the first outlying farm, and the familiar scent of drying clover hay and sleepy livestock greets you like the voice of an old friend. Soon, the dark, sturdy silhouette of the local tavern emerges from the thickening dusk, its small leaded glass windows glowing with a soft amber invitation that promises warmth and companionship. Within those thick timber walls, the world is small, predictable, and profoundly safe. There is the low, rhythmic, and comforting mumble of deep voices discussing the eternal topics of the weather and the coming crops, the soft clink of pewter mugs against wood, and the steady crackling and ancient reassurance of a massive stone hearth. Here, the terrifying stories of the road are told as if they were distant legends from another planet, safely contained by the sturdy hand-hewn timber of the walls. Even the Sunday sermon at the small white clapboard church on the hill feels like a protective, collective incantation, a weekly, rhythmic reminder that your world is orderly, watched over, and bounded by the grace of the familiar and the known. And here is the beautiful, quiet, and deeply human reveal of how your ancestors truly found their way home in a world without maps. In the year 1803, navigation was not a cold matter of geometry, cardinal directions, or paper documents. It was a sacred, lifelong act of memory and profound intimacy with the living land. You did not look for numbered road signs or abstract directions. Instead, you navigated by the specific bent oak tree that leaned toward the rushing creek like a thirsty, drinking giant. You looked for the great white stone in the meadow that had split perfectly in half during the legendary hard frost of 1794, or the specific sharp bend in the river where the dark current always churned into a boiling silver froth. Every rolling hill had a name, every clearing had a family story, and every ancient tree was a landmark of the soul. To know the way home was to be in a deep, lifelong, and silent conversation with the landscape. The earth was not a grid to be conquered or measured. It was a collection of beloved landmarks that lived in your mind as clearly and as vibrantly as the faces of your own children. You were never truly lost, as long as you could find that one solitary sycamore tree that turned ghost white in the moonlight. For that tree was the silent, eternal guardian of the secret path back to the warmth of the hearth. Let your tired mind drift now to the final, cooling, and settling moments of the day as the village prepares itself for a night of deep rest. The sun has long since vanished behind the ridges, leaving only a faint, bruised purple and indigo line along the western horizon. The earth itself is exhaling its remaining heat, the ground beneath the tavern porch turning cold, firm, and silent. Listen closely to the sounds of the world tucking itself in, the distant, rhythmic, and lowing sound of cattle being settled into their warm stalls, and the heavy, metallic slide of iron bolts being drawn across thick oak doors. Imagine the sound of the heavy wooden shutters being closed, one by one, a solid, final, and satisfying thud that seals out the vast, dark, and cold mystery of the surrounding forest. Inside the small cabins, the only remaining light comes from the dying, orange embers of the fire, casting long, dancing, and hypnotic shadows of rockers and spinning wheels against the rough log walls. The world has contracted, smaller and smaller, until it is only as large and as safe as the gentle reach of the firelight. The stillness now is absolute and perfect. It is the peace of the rooted, the deep, soul-level satisfaction of those who have survived the trials of the day and returned to the absolute center of their own universe. Your bed in the high loft is filled with the clean scent of dried lavender and the heavy, comforting smell of coarse, natural wool, a sanctuary within a sanctuary. As you pull the heavy, hand-stitched quilts up to your chin, the lingering fears of the 11-mile mark, the treacherous mud, and the fragile bones of the horse fade into complete insignificance. You are safe, you are known, you are home. The 10-mile circle has closed its ancient arms around you once more, whispering in the silence that this is enough, that the world you can see from your own chimney top is the only world that truly matters for a human soul. But even as you begin to drift into a deep and dreamless sleep, the cool night air outside is beginning to vibrate with a new, strange, and alien frequency far beyond the quiet ridges of your valley, in the smoky workshops of the distant east and the coal-dusted valleys of the old world. A new and terrible kind of power is being forged in fire and blackened steel. The profound silence of the 10-mile circle, which has stood unchallenged for 1,000 years of human history, is about to be shattered by a sound that no ear in this peaceful village has ever heard. The slow, rhythmic story of the horse and the mud is reaching its very final chapter. For even as you rest in the absolute warmth of the hearth, a relentless change is coming, a transformation that does not care for the ancient bent oak tree or the sacred memory of the white stone. It is a transformation that will tear the circle wide open, riding on relentless rails of iron and heavy, dark clouds of steam. Imagine, for a long and quiet moment, that the year is no longer 1803, but several decades has passed like a slow-moving river. You are sitting on that same silvered, hand-hewn wooden porch, watching the long shadows lengthen over the very same fields your grandfather once cleared with his own hands. But the air around you is no longer perfectly still. From far beyond the jagged eastern ridge, a new kind of sound begins to rise, a low, mournful, and metallic wail that slices through the ancient, sacred silence of the valley. It is the very first time a steam whistle has ever echoed through these peaceful hills. It is a sound that feels both like a miraculous wonder and a cold, piercing threat, a shrill cry of progress that vibrates deep within the very marrow of your bones. As the first massive iron locomotive thunders past in the distance, miles away but felt vividly in the subtle trembling of your porch floorboards, you realize with a heavy heart that the 10-mile circle has not just been breached, it has been shattered forever. The world of the horse and the mud, the world of the bent oak tree and the sacred white stone, is suddenly being folded up and put away like a dusty, forgotten map. The expansion that follows this moment is dizzying and absolute. A tectonic shift in the fundamental human experience of space and time. In a single generation, the horizon that once took a full week of sweat, muscle, and prayer to reach is now passed in a single hour of effortless, mechanical gliding. The world expands with a terrifying speed from 10 miles to 100, and then to 1,000, leaving the slow-moving human soul breathless and unmoored. The profound rootedness that once defined every single soul in this village begins to fray and dissolve. You no longer have to know the intimate name of every neighbor to ensure your survival. You no longer have to study the subtle language of the mud to find your way home. The cold steam engine does not care about the changing of the seasons or the physical exhaustion of the beast. It moves with a relentless, mechanical certainty, tearing through the ancient forests that once felt infinite and bridging the black swamps that once swallowed massive wagons whole. As the iron rails spread like a cold silver web across the entire continent, the deep intimacy of the local world begins to dissolve into the bland convenience of the distant. And here is the quiet, melancholic reveal of our vast modern age. As the world got bigger, as we gained the technological freedom to be anywhere at any time, we also became profoundly and permanently anonymous. In the old circle, to be truly known was to be safe. To be seen by your community was to be anchored to the earth. But on the iron rails, and later on the endless paved highways, we became travelers without faces and without histories. We began to pass through landscapes instead of truly living in them. We traded the deep, narrow well of community for a wide, shallow, and restless sea of constant motion. We gained the remarkable ability to reinvent ourselves 200 miles away, to disappear and reappear as total strangers in a world that no longer asks who our fathers were or what soil we were born from. We are more free today than our ancestors could have ever dreamed in their wildest visions. Yet we carry a quiet phantom limb pain for a sense of belonging that was once as natural and as necessary as breathing. Let your voice drop now to a soft, lingering and ancient whisper as we look together at the frantic world we inhabit today. Beneath the smooth, black and indifferent asphalt of our modern interstates, the ghosts of the old roads still remain, waiting in the dark. If you look closely enough at the edges of the deep woods, you can still see the faint, sunken ruts where the heavy wagons once struggled for every inch of progress. You can still find the ancient stone walls, now overgrown with thick ivy and forgotten by the rush of time, that once marked the absolute, sacred boundary of a family's entire universe. We drive at 70 miles an hour over the very same ground where a man once spent an entire, ruling day moving a single mile. The profound silence of the year 1803 is still there, buried deep beneath the noise of our engines and the invisible hum of our digital signals, waiting patiently for someone to stop long enough to truly listen. The circle is gone now, and the hand-carved fences have long since rotted back into the dark soil. We are no longer held captive by the heavy mud of the road, and we are no longer limited by the strength of a horse's fragile leg. We have become creatures of the infinite horizon, restless nomads of a global village that never sleeps. But as you drift slowly toward the very edge of sleep, feel the solid, unchanging, and ancient weight of the earth beneath your own bed. Feel the way the ground still holds you, regardless of how far you have traveled or how fast you have lived your life. We have outrun our physical boundaries, but we have not outrun our fundamental nature. The stillness of the past is not truly gone. It is simply waiting for you to return to it in the quiet velvet dark of the night. The long journey of the day is finally over. The steam has faded into the mist. The loud whistles have fallen silent, and the frantic, restless motion of the modern world has finally begun to settle back into the quiet dust. You are back exactly where you started, in the quiet, sacred sanctuary of the present moment, where the only distance that truly matters is the soft space between your breath and your dreams. The iron rails have grown cold, and the roads have turned back into shadows. The world is small again, just for tonight, and you are safe within its reach. The circle is gone, but the ground remains as your slow breath begins to steady, and the heavy weight of your tired body sinks fully and completely into the profound stillness of the night. We find ourselves standing together at the final quiet crossroad of our long journey through time. We have traveled through the thick, gray mud of a lost century, felt the bone-shaking and rhythmic vibration of the corduroy roads, and witnessed the slow, inevitable expansion of the entire human world. But as the final haunting echoes of the steam whistle fade into the distance of the past, a quiet, persistent, and lingering question remains, hovering in the cool air like the last faint wisp of wood smoke from a dying hearth fire. Are we truly more free now that we possess the technological power to go anywhere at any single time? We have shattered the ancient 10-mile circle and claimed the entire massive planet as our personal playground. We have conquered the vastness of distance, silenced the immense difficulty of the path, and made the distant horizon a mere thing to be consumed in a matter of a few fleeting hours. Yet, as we stand in the vast, open, and often lonely expanse of the 21st century, we must wonder if we have simply traded one kind of heavy cage for another. In the quiet year of 1803, the circle was physical, tangible, and real. It was made of thick, unyielding clay, dense, primeval timber, and the natural exhaustion of the human frame. It was a boundary you could touch with your hands, a limit you could see with your own eyes from the top of the nearest familiar hill. Today, however, our circles have become invisible, digital, and infinitely more complex. We may travel 1,000 miles in a single day, but we often do so while tethered to a small, glowing screen that keeps our precious attention locked in a narrow circle no wider than the palm of our hand. We navigate a vast global network of infinite information, yet we often know less about the living soil beneath our own feet than the ancestors who never once left their valley. We have replaced the 10-mile radius of the earth with the infinite, restless scroll of the mind. We are no longer limited by the physical mud of the road, but we are often paralyzed by the constant noise of the present, caught in a restless motion that feels like progress, but often leaves us exactly where we started, searching desperately for a sense of true place in a world that feels increasingly temporary and fragile. The profound and quiet reveal of our modern existence is this: we have gained more miles, but perhaps we have lost the deep, sacred connection to the very dirt we walk upon every day. In the old world of the circle, to know 10 miles meant to know every single secret, every hidden spring, and every ancient story of those 10 miles. You knew exactly which tree would bloom first in the spring, and which creek would freeze solid enough to hold the weight of a horse in the heart of winter. You were intimately, beautifully, and irrevocably entwined with the physical reality of your own existence. Today, we have become masters of the surface. We skim over the face of the earth at incredible, unnatural speeds, treating the sacred landscape as a mere backdrop rather than a true home. We have exchanged the deep, narrow intimacy of the local for the wide, shallow, and cold anonymity of the global. We are more connected to the entire world than ever before in history, yet we are often more isolated from our immediate surroundings than a lonely settler in a log cabin in the middle of a winter storm. Let this quiet thought settle over you now, as gentle and as inevitable as the falling dew on a summer meadow. Imagine that your mind is a weary traveler returning from a long, exhausting journey through the decades. It has seen the wonders of the iron rail and the incredible speed of the modern highway, but now it is looking only for a quiet place to rest. Consider for a moment what it would feel like to truly belong to a single, sacred patch of ground, to have your identity rooted so deeply in the dark soil that no wind could ever blow you away. What if the profound limits of the past were not a prison, but a form of divine protection? What if the 10-mile circle was actually a beautiful garden, and the immense difficulty of the road was simply the fence that kept the sanctuary safe from the world? As you drift closer and closer to the velvet threshold of sleep, permit yourself to finally let go of the modern need for distance. Let go of the constant urge to be everywhere at once. You are here, in this quiet room, in this perfect moment, and that is more than enough for any soul. The world outside is vast, loud, and moving at a frantic pace that the human heart was never meant to sustain for long. But inside the sanctuary of your own mind, the clock has finally stopped ticking. The modern world has retreated into the shadows, leaving only the soft, rhythmic, and natural sound of your own breathing. You are no longer a nomad of the digital age. You are a soul finding its way back to the quiet, still center of the universe. The ghosts of 1803 are not distant, dusty strangers. They are a living part of you, a gentle reminder that the greatest journeys are not measured in miles on a map, but in the profound depth of our own presence. You are safe in the stillness. You are anchored in the dark. The world and all its noise can wait until the sun rises again. As your eyelids grow impossibly heavy, and the final soft shadows of the room blend into the velvet darkness, remember the quiet of 1803. Remember the solid weight of the mud, the ancient warmth of the hearth, and the sacred, forgotten beauty of simply staying put. The circle is not a limit. It is a rest for the weary. Let the silence of the old roads and the memory of the trees pull you down into a deep, restorative, and beautiful sleep, where there are no more distances to cover and no more horizons to reach. The earth is holding you, the night is shielding you, and the journey is finally, blissfully at an end. As your eyes grow heavy, remember the quiet of 1803. The room around you has become very still now, settled into a deep and motionless quiet that feels like a physical presence. The air has transformed into a soft, comforting weight that presses gently against your skin, grounding you perfectly in the absolute peace of the present moment. If you listen with a quiet heart, you can almost hear the night itself, the vast, cool, and infinite expansion of the dark sky, and the way the long shadows seem to breathe in slow, perfect time with the cooling earth. All the frantic, fragmented energy of the modern day has long since dissolved into nothingness, leaving behind only the pure, uncomplicated, and sacred reality of this space. You are here. You are safe. You are exactly where you were always meant to be at this hour. Look up now with your mind's eye and see the stars exactly as they appeared to the silent world of 1803. They are not the distant, pale flickers we see through the heavy haze of city lights. They are brilliant, piercing, and ancient. They are the very same steady, diamond lights that guided the weary travelers home to their families, the same silver points that watched over the silent village and the deep, dark, and protective woods. They hang in a velvet sky of infinite, welcoming depth, offering a soft light that does not demand a single thing from you. It is a light that only watches with kindness. It is a light that deeply understands the profound beauty of human stillness. Somewhere, far across the dark ridges of the valley, a soft wind is moving through the high ancient pines, but it is a distant, fading sound, a gentle, rhythmic, and lonely sigh that only serves to remind you of how warm, how dry, and how protected you are within the sanctuary of your own bed. Tonight, you are finally and completely free from the heavy burden of the road. You do not have to worry about the treacherous depth of the mud or the fragile strength of a wooden wheel. You do not have to negotiate with a vast distance or measure the long hours until your arrival at a distant gate. Maps of the world have been folded and put away in a dark drawer. The lanterns have all been extinguished. The horses are resting deeply in their warm stalls, their heavy heads hanging low, their breathing deep, slow, and rhythmic. The iron rails of the future are cold and silent. The world has stopped its spinning, just for you, allowing you to simply drift in the slow, dark current of the night. You are unmoored from all worldly responsibilities. You are disconnected from all demands and all expectations. Tonight, you do not have to travel anywhere at all. There are no more miles left to count. There are no more landmarks left to find in the dark. The 10-mile circle and the infinite, loud world beyond it have both faded away into a soft, gray, and harmless mist. The only reality that remains in the universe is the incredible comfort of your pillow, the heavy warmth of your thick blankets, and the steady, rhythmic, and natural rise and fall of your own chest. You are the very center of a quiet, peaceful universe. You are the master of this stillness. Every single muscle in your body now has full permission to let go. Every lingering thought in your tired mind has permission to dissolve into the welcoming dark. Imagine the earth cooling slowly beneath the foundations of the house, the ancient stones settling deeper into the soil, becoming one with the solid ground. You are settling too. You are becoming a part of the quiet. You are becoming a part of the eternal peace. The darkness surrounding you is not an empty or lonely space. It is a soft, cushioned, and velvet embrace. It is a shield that keeps the noise of the world far away. It is a private garden where your dreams can grow quietly without any interference. Safe, still, home. The profound silence of the old roads is your own silence now. The deep, lasting peace of the hearth is your own peace now. There is nothing left for you to do. There is nothing left for you to say. The story has reached its natural end, and the night has finally taken over the narrative. You are floating peacefully on a sea of perfect, restorative, and absolute calm. Let the darkness pull you down, deeper and deeper, into the soft luxury of a sleep that knows no boundaries, no fences, and no limits. You are home. You are home. The stars will continue their long, silent watch over the fields. The wind will continue its gentle sigh through the trees. The earth will continue to hold you with its ancient strength. But you are drifting away now. You are crossing the final soft threshold into the great, quiet, and beautiful mystery of sleep. The journey is over. Sleep now. Sleep